We all know him as one of the greatest rebounders and defenders the game of basketball has ever seen. His tenacious, hard-nosed effort and win-at-all-cost mentality, fighting for the ball on every possession no matter the stakes, and doing everything he could to get under his opponent's skin is what gave him the nickname The Worm and Dennis the Menace. If you were matching up against Dennis Rodman in a given game, you knew you were going to be in for a long night. Scoring or even getting a measly rebound was damn near impossible against him, and as much as some might like to say he was just a benefactor of playing with some of the greatest players of all time like Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Isaiah Thomas, it's hard to say that those guys would have won all of their championships without Dennis Rodman, a player who knew his role, fit perfectly in their system, and did whatever was required in order to win for the betterment of the team. Simply put, Rodman was a unique specimen at that time in the NBA, a player who didn't really need the ball in his hands, a player who didn't need to score, but was incredibly effective and impactful when on the court. Speaks volumes when a player who only averaged 7 points per game for his career managed to tally 5 championships, 8 all-defensive teams, 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards, 2-time All-Star, and led the league in rebounds for 7 straight seasons as a 6'7", 210 power forward, doing this in an era where the traditional big man was king. And Rodman managed to lead the NBA in rebounds for 7 straight seasons, which is a record that still remains to this day and will likely never be broken. But while we already know all of this, the life and career of Dennis Rodman is one of the most unique stories in NBA history, and it's what you don't know that makes this story more surprising than the Hall of Fame career, and it's what we'll be talking about in this video. As always, if you're new to the channel and you like this type of content, it would mean a great deal to me if you subscribe to help the channel grow, and in return I'll be providing more NBA content like this. Also, feel free to leave suggestions in the comments on the topics you would like to see discussed on the channel in the future. Now, as most of you know, if you've been following the channel for some time, or my main channel, Bulls Central, you know that I'm a Bulls fan, and have been one since I was a kid dating all the way back to the 90s dynasty. And as a kid growing up idolizing Michael Jordan and that whole Bulls roster, I can tell you my viewpoint and appreciation for Dennis Rodman is going to be higher than most because of the fact that he played for my team and helped them win 3 titles. And also just the fact that I'm old enough to remember seeing him play. But as a kid, what you don't know are the off-court challenges and issues that came with Dennis Rodman, especially the path that he had to take in order to get to the NBA, and the incredibly troubling childhood he had to endure, which made him the way that he was and how he approached both the game on and off the court. Like some players throughout NBA history, Rodman came from a broken home whose father left him and the family at a young age. His mother was forced to work odd jobs. For some periods of time, she was working as many as 4 jobs just to make ends meet. And Rodman and his siblings were mostly left to themselves, where they grew up in one of the most impoverished parts of Dallas, Texas. With parents not being a focal point in their lives, him and his 2 sisters looked to basketball as an outlet to get away from the struggles of home life, which oddly enough, I'm sure most of you did not know this, and I was stunned to learn it myself, but his 2 sisters, for which they shared the same mom and dad, they were just 2 of what is reported to be a total of 47 siblings of Dennis Rodman, most of those half-siblings from his father's side. This according to Dennis Rodman himself. Whether or not that's actually true hasn't been confirmed, but either way, dude had a lot of siblings. But that tangent aside, for Rodman and his 2 full siblings, between the 3 of them, Rodman was actually the least talented of them in terms of his overall play, skill set, physique, and what drew attention from scouts. His 2 younger sisters would later go on to become All-Americans in women's college basketball, while Dennis, on the other hand, would get embarrassed by his sisters outworking him on the basketball court, and because he was such a late bloomer, measuring only 5'6" in his freshman year with a skinny frame, was cut from the basketball team and football team, which Rodman was really more of a fan of the game of football and was especially saddened by not being good enough to make the high school team. And as for basketball, while it was known that he was a hard worker, was fast, and wasn't afraid to get dirty and diving for loose balls, he wasn't seen as a viable player on the varsity roster because he was smoking layups. Dude just could not finish at the rim and really just score in general. And to be honest, a lot of it had to do with the fact that he wasn't athletic as his peers, and he was just too small. Rodman grew a little, of course, but was still only 5'10" by the end of his senior year, and after finishing high school, things looked pretty bleak for Dennis, who opted to not go to college and would work as a janitor at the Dallas-Fort Worth airport. But between the end of his senior year, at the age of 18, all the way to age 21, Rodman had a massive growth spurt in which he would go from 5'7" to 6'7" in just those 3 years. And after calling college off and unsure what was going to come of his life, he thought, maybe I'll give this basketball thing another go, since I'm now 6'7" and towering over all those guys that used to make me look bad. And after taking years off from playing basketball, And then going to play for community college, Dennis Rodman broke out and realized he had something here. Because while Rodman was never known for his scoring in the NBA, this man could put the ball in the bucket when it became so much easier to do so at 6'7" compared to 5'6" when he was a freshman in high school. Rodman would go on to leave community college and played Division I basketball at Southeastern Oklahoma State University and was by far and away the team's best player, putting up insane numbers where he averaged over the course of the 3 years he was there 25.7 points per game and 15.7 rebounds with a field goal percentage of 63% on over 25 points per game. I know it's a small school and a weaker conference, but those are insane figures for a player to be putting up in the NCAA. But anyway, Rodman, who again played college ball late by normal player standards, he didn't graduate until he was 24 and was then drafted in the second round by the Detroit Pistons in 1986. Here's the thing. I don't need to go through Rodman's entire playing career in the NBA. We know how great he was. We know the impact he had on the bad boy Pistons and winning 2 championships with that team. We know how pivotal he was in the second three-peat for the Bulls in the 90s. And we know that despite being overlooked as a player at a young age, that he would eventually become a Hall of Famer and a member of the top 75 anniversary team. One thing that isn't talked about when it comes to the career and life of Dennis Rodman is his mental health and addiction struggles that impacted who he was as a player on the court. You see, at the time back when Rodman played, mental health was still a very taboo topic, and especially in a league of male-dominated egos where you couldn't show any signs of weakness, keeping your emotions to yourself, and where seeking mental health wasn't as readily available as it is today. For Dennis Rodman, his form of coping with his decaying mental health was to let it out on the court, giving it all like every game was his last, pushing those emotions and feelings aside and using that hurt and anger on the court because no one would listen to him and the things that he was going through. For most people at that time, it was, you're an NBA basketball player making millions of dollars. What do you have to be sad and depressed about? Rodman's reaction to winning his first Defensive Player of the Year award in 1990, where he broke down at the press conference, says it all.
I wanted this one so bad.
Everything Rodman was going through in life had to be kept down inside him and only could be released on the court. And to be recognized at that level was too emotional for him to control. If this were to happen now, a player breaking down after receiving an award, they would be praised for letting their guard down and viewing it as a sign of strength to cry in front of the media. But that's not how this was received by the NBA back then. For Rodman, even though by most it seemed like he had it all, an all-star player at the top of his game and the peak of his prime was actually spiraling towards a very dark place. And that hit ahead after the bad boy Pistons started losing, Chuck Daly resigned, and one night in 1993, Rodman, with a loaded gun to his head in his car, contemplated suicide and ending it all, despite having over $11 million left on his contract, walking away from everything just to have the pain go away. Rodman would eventually fall asleep, and when police found him, Rodman decided rather than to actually kill himself, he was going to kill the, quote, shy imposter, as he called it, and live his life the way he wanted to live it. Of course, the Pistons would ultimately trade him to the Spurs, where he still played well, but created a ton of conflict with his new style of erratic behavior that he was displaying on and off the court, getting in fights with players not only on the opposing team, but on his own team, not getting along with the Spurs front office, getting ejected from games, suspended. Rodman started taking this approach of, this is who I am, and if you don't like it, the hell with you. He didn't care if that cost him money, future contracts, awards, accolades. This was how he wanted to play, and nobody was stopping him. But while you could applaud this no-nonsense approach and unconventional behavior to just being oneself, inside it was a man who was still struggling. While it didn't affect his play on the court, Dennis had severe struggles with alcohol abuse and run-ins with the law both during and after his career, stemming from public intoxication, disorderly conduct, driving under the influence multiple times, domestic violence charges stemming from being intoxicated, as well as a hit-and-run incident which occurred after his career. Rodman has had multiple stints of rehab interventions but continues to struggle with addiction today, who is now in his 60s. The way people describe the life of Dennis Rodman, and the way he even describes it himself, it's shocking that he's still alive today. I mean, we all saw The Last Dance, in which he went on a bender to Vegas in the NBA Finals. You would never see that happen today in the NBA. But that's what Rodman needed in his life to get through the challenges he had to endure and the mental health struggles that plagued him since childhood that were never treated. Now, Rodman going to the Bulls was one of the best things that happened to him because the Bulls embraced Rodman and allowed him to be himself, within reason of course, with little judgment on their end. They gave him multiple passes, let him do whatever he needed to do to get things out of his system in order for him to be the player they needed him to be. And I guess what surprises me in all of this is that despite the alcohol issues, despite the erratic behavior, despite the run-ins with the law and the heavy scrutiny around him, he still managed to be consistently a dominant force on the basketball court. Hungover, not hungover, missing games after being suspended, it didn't really matter. When it came time to play, he was there, he was ready, and he gave it his all. Everyone has their way of coping with their daily challenges and struggles of life. For Rodman, it was giving it his all on the basketball court and not caring with his approach and attitude towards the game. So while we'll always know and remember Dennis Rodman for his vibrant character and tenacious player that he was on the court, an NBA legend and Hall of Famer, there's also the side of him that isn't discussed, the dark side that makes you feel for him as a human being and hoping that he is now able to find some semblance of peace later on in his life. Let me know what you guys think. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.